Welcome all to the Node, your place for news, interviews, and education. I am Mike, aka Veteran Crypto, and I'm sure David, as usual, will join us here in a few moments. But until then, let me introduce our socials and we'll go from there. So, as you can see here, if you want to join the conversation, join the chat, ask questions, tell us we're full of shit, whatever it is that you want to say, come on over here to YouTube, where you can find us at the Node Network, all one word. Want to thank all of you out there. Been watching, our numbers go up, and being this deep into the bear market, you've helped us grow. We've actually grown quite a bit since we launched the Node. So thank you to all of you out there, who find the content that we put out, multiple times a day valuable. So thank you for that. I'll go over the different channels here in a second. If you want to find us on X, you can find us at the Node_network. So just add an underscore in there. And if you want to find everything that all of our offerings. So all of our no-cost offerings, as far as education, community, all those things, you can find them all here, links to all of it. And also, if you want to support the channel or you find any of our paid offerings, valuable, our coaching, our newsletter, our store, you can, buy merch. We make it a point that we do not accept any sort of compensation from any project ever, in the form of crypto, in the form of fiat. We do not accept any sort of money. We don't want to be incentivized to speak a certain way about a project. We are going to expose the good and the bad about every project. We are all about integrity.
Talk shit,
And I am the king of talking shit. I will definitely talk some shit. But the way that we're able to do that is with your support. By all means, I know it's rough out there. Don't purchase things just for the sake of purchasing things. If you find value, we appreciate it. If you can't afford it, that is fine. We just appreciate. Give us a like. That doesn't cost anything. Give us a follow. That doesn't cost anything. And honestly, that's a lot more valuable. So, please, by all means, at least like and share the stream, and follow us. But you can find all of our programming here. So here's the calendar. So as you can see, Monday through Friday, we have multiple live shows. So, today, we have the Node Show. We have David's Daily Market Wrap at 4 p.m. Eastern, where he does about 15 to 20 minutes of technical analysis and tells you what happened in the markets that day. Also today, he has Ellie. He's putting through his coaching program, and giving full transparency. That is a paid service. He will do, an initial consultation at no cost to make sure that it's right for you, and that you're, in a place that you can benefit from it. So he does that on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but every day he does a market wrap. On Wednesday, you can see we have 4 live shows, actually 5 if you count David's DeFi University live call with his members. Every day there is multiple, and many of which, the majority of which, are at no cost. We just want to educate people here. We genuinely want to help people to avoid the mistakes that we had to make, the costly mistakes that we had to make, and most people had to make getting into crypto, DeFi, and investing. Because most people out there aren't going to teach you unless you pay them, or you just got to make the mistakes. So that's why myself, David, and Jeff started this channel. And we've been doing this for years, under DeFi, crypto, and airdrops. And David had DeFi University. It was just a natural, a natural transition to come together and kind of merge. So again, you have the courses. You can come here if you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced. Just click on where you're at, and it will recommend where you should start in the curriculum of courses. It's fully structured. It is with quizzes and checks on learning. You're not going to find a better product out there, and you're definitely not going to find a better product that doesn't cost you anything. So you have nobody to blame but yourself. If you don't understand crypto, if you don't understand TradFi, if you don't understand DeFi and how DeFi works and liquidity pools and range and full range, advanced strategies, all of that. If you don't understand that and you're not taking advantage of this, you have nobody to blame but yourself. Community. If you want to join those live calls, that is a paid service. That is $99 a month, but you get multiple calls per week with David and the rest of his community that are experienced DeFi investors and successful ones. And that is, when you get to that level and you're looking for a mentor to take you to the next level, that is the place that you go. So, we're absolutely happy to give you no cost education. But again, if you want to make a profession out of this, or if you want to make it a revenue stream, you want to build a portfolio that you can potentially, get to a point to where you can, augment your monthly income, or even, quit your day job if you get successful enough and do it full time. And what we call fuck you money here. It's what David does. It's what I do. Is we do whatever we want from the time our head leaves the pillow to the time it hits it at night. We do whatever we want to do. You don't have to be a multimillionaire to have fuck you money. You just have to have enough to pay your bills and be able to do what you want to do with your life. It's not hard.
It takes true. And Mike, I think a lot of people think that number that they need to have is like some multiple millions of dollars, and it's just not. It's really just not. You can, depending on what your lifestyle is like, and whether you've got children, where you live, where you might want to live, like you can get it done for 6 figures. It doesn't have to be multiple 7 figures to be able to be completely independent and quit your job and do whatever it is that you want to do. So, absolutely.
And then the Discord. So if you're looking for an entry level community, at no cost, if you want to, just have people to chat with, ask, questions about, how a protocol works, or if you're having a problem with, I've even asked the community before for help, where I'm having an issue with, my wallet connecting to a protocol. And so I'll ask the community, hey, is anybody else out there having issues, with connecting, their wallet connecting or something like that? It's nice to have people to, ask questions, to help you out. Or if for some reason, I've had Jeff, our co-founder, I've had him help me with wallet issues before, where, all of a sudden, assets disappear out of my wallet. And I'm like, oh shit, did I get hacked? He's helped me, recover those assets, and it was just a matter of them displaying properly in the wallet. So
that must have been MetaMask back in the day, right?
Yeah, it was. So it's just, David is my DeFi go-to. And anytime I have wallet issues, I go to Jeff. It's good to have people that you can, trust, that you can ask these questions from. So again, join our no-cost Discord. We have people joining every day. It's a great community in there. We laugh, joke, share memes. It's just a place to hang out. And then David is launching the calls that he does on school, those live calls with his community, is also launching that on a paid membership on YouTube. If you want to do it there and you don't want to do it in the school, or if you want to do it in the Discord. So again, the overall Discord is no cost, but there is a premium channel in there for those calls. So you can join those calls with a school if you like. You can join it on YouTube if you just trust that platform, more, or for whatever reason, because you've never heard of school, or if you want to do it in the Discord. It's totally up to you. But again, that is a paid service.
So Mike, just real quick on the community section stuff. So what those calls do, that's just it's like your access to the paid calls. So those Monday, Wednesday, Friday calls that I run, there you can access them through school, you can access them through Discord, or you can access them through YouTube. It's just, where do you feel most comfortable? Do you want to join through YouTube? Okay, great. Do you want to join through Discord and be able to communicate with everyone on the team? Awesome. Or do you want to go through school and maybe have more of a structured learning experience? It's really just up to you, whatever you're most comfortable with.
Absolutely. Hold
So
on
let's see
once.
what we got going on today in markets, man. It looks like things are pulling back. There was a hot
Well,
CPI print.
well, real quick, we still got the newsletter. We still got the newsletter that David's working on.
And that thing has been so challenging to finish building.
Oh, I know. It's whenever you build something with with AI and Cursor and stuff like that. For some reason, it's like it has a mind of its own. I've done it before when I was trying to build a DeFi portfolio tracker, and I would get it to where it's like, yep, got it, and then for whatever reason, wait an hour or two, and all of a sudden it's not working. And and I ask it, what did you change? They're like, oh, well, I did this. It's like, no, don't do anything unless I tell you to. And it just does. I don't know what it is. But if you want to try out the newsletter at no cost, no gimmicks, just put your email in, do your preview. I'll show you. We'll see if it's going to cooperate this morning.
Probably not. I haven't rebuilt it.
It looks like a lot of it is. Yeah.
Kind of, sort of.
No, yeah, pretty much the whole,
partial.
The whole thing.
Partial.
Like I said, it has a mind of its own.
Yeah.
So it gives you ETF flows, so you have an idea of what's going on in the overall in the markets. Fear and greed index will give you a snapshot of the assets that you choose, not that we choose, and so it will let you know, what the price is and what the. It looks like you have the hyperlinks, to any information that you get, you should always verify. I don't care how trustworthy the source is. You should always verify the data, especially if it has to do with investing. It's so important to always verify data. But anyway, the store. So we're tweaking the designs on these. I owe David some designs for Sovereign Soil and the Red Pill. I'll get those to you today. But we're tweaking up the designs on these. But again, if you're wanting to support the channel, represent the channel, we appreciate it. Once we get these dialed in, if you like what you see, this is where you get it. This is where you get it. And with that, I want to share this. So a member of our community in the Discord, shared this, and I want to give him a shout out. It was a Black Ice. So Black Ice is an OG in our community, always sharing great posts. So it looks like there's been an update to the new Aerodrome DEX that is going to be launching in July, or supposed to be launching in July. So these are the chains that are going to be on it. It's of course Base, Ethereum mainnet, OP mainnet, Arc, which is Circle's new chain, Syndicate, Celo, Inc., Sonium, Unichain, never heard of Lisk, never heard of Superseed, Mode, Metal L2, Swell Chain, Fractal, and T. Haven't heard of a bunch of those, but the one I find interesting is Arc. Just because it's USDC. And, so having access to that, any liquidity that is able to move across Arc is going to potentially be able to move across the new Aerodrome protocol. So, they're touting the new Aerodrome protocol as the liquidity hub for the future of finance. What that actually looks like and how that actually unfolds is to be determined. But what can't be argued is what Aerodrome has already accomplished and is only on the Base network. So as they add ETH mainnet and OP mainnet and ARC and all these other ones, it's going to be interesting to see how the TVL grows, how the volume grows, how the fees grow. So do with that as you will. Not saying run out and buy Aerodrome. Do your own research. I have a very large bag of it. Full disclosure, it's my top holding because I'm a degen. But David, that's why I love David. Is he always will find and pick apart these projects and give you the good and the bad. Same as me. But we have to keep each other in check. A lot of people think that a lot of the posts I do on X is I'm trying to FUD out their projects. No, I'm trying to be the other voice. Everything on X is always bullish. Everyone's always wanting to hype and pump a project because they hold it or they're a part of it. It's kind of the somewhat of a beef that I had with Dagnum PI, even though I respect the guy, interviewed him twice on the show, but I was pointing out simple facts about DAG, and it's been pumping lately, because of they got acquired by like AI, but it doesn't change the things that I said. It's pumping because of speculation. There was good news, and people bought the good news. People have taken profits since, and it's kind of found a new range. But we have to, as a community, we have to be realistic. We have to be logical, and we have to be able to be the most critical of the projects that we are invested in. It's why I'm always looking for the negative aspects of the projects that I'm invested in. It's why I got out of XRP. It's why I got out of DAG. It's why I got out of Ondo.
So Mike, we've got to stop talking about XRP, because every time I talk about XRP, I start getting content on my phone when I'm scrolling through shorts. I'll get content about XRP on my phone because I talk about it. My phone's listening, of course, to everything I say. So, dude, if we keep talking about XRP and I keep getting XRP content on my phone, it's going to drive me crazy, because it's always like the same handful of accounts, always saying the same nonsense over and over again.
And I bet you I could name them.
Oh man, so I always think about what's the risk. It's not about fun. Like, that's not what it's about. I want to learn everything I can about these digital assets, these crypto protocols, these DeFi protocols. I want to learn about their tokenomics. Do they generate revenue? Are those revenue? Stuff like that. And most of these projects are vapor. So, if you feel like we're fudding out your project, we're not. If presenting information to you that might run contrary to your deeply held belief, if you think that's FUD, well, you might be suffering from a case of cognitive dissonance, So you got to be able to take in information that's contrary to what you believe and evaluate it and say, hey, you know what? Does this mean that what I invested in maybe isn't what I think it is? You got to be able to, just objectively think through stuff like this. You can't be emotional when you're dealing with investing in digital assets at all. So,
or just investing, in general. It's I don't know. It's interesting to watch how people react when presented with facts and information. It's almost a study in the human behavior. Whenever I'm on X, and I'll post a very well reasoned and cited. I'll cite my sources, and a lot of times, like in the case of the token that shall not be mentioned, I'll actually cite Ripple's own website, and people will still just put the little laughing emoji or put a meme or something like that, and I'm just like, you're not. I'm asking you to prove me wrong. And the fact that you can't is more telling. And the fact that you're trying to, divert attention away by trying to troll, which doesn't work on me, by the way. I was in the military for 22 years. I'm an expert level troll. There is nothing that you're going to say or do. You can call me a homo. You can call me whatever you want. I'll troll myself harder than you can troll me. So, I don't know why people bother.
So what that is? So those are called ad hominem. So those ad hominem attacks, like to the man, those are that's what that type of attack is called. So if you can't argue the facts, then what people do instead is they attack
your
the person.
character.
Right. Yeah. They attack the person. It's kind of what Democrats do. So
it's what people that lack intelligence or lack, like you said, lack the ability to articulate their point. And that the bottom line is we don't care what you buy. That's your business. I couldn't care less. I just want you to do it and be educated on what you're buying. If you want to have nothing but that token, that shall not be named, go ahead. As long as you understand the tokenomics of it. if you want to buy some shit coin, some, all or a meme coin, I couldn't care less. It has no effect on me whatsoever. I just want you to do it and be fully knowledgeable about the fact that you're investing in a meme coin and you are trading on, emotion, that people's interest in, that whatever the flavor of the day is in memes. It's, you just understand what you're investing in. That's all we're trying to do here. So with that, let's get into what we got going on. So the first thing, the XRP ETF surge.
Oh,
Spot
great.
XRP ETFs recorded their largest single day inflow
Of
since
what,
January,
$5? They got an inflow?
totaling $26 million, signaling renewed institutional appetite for Ripple-linked products.
Ugh.
What products?
Right. Ripple. Does it say the products?
I mean, I could go to the block and here, I'll pull it up real quick.
What they launched, I saw, Mike, when I was walking around a grocery store in Northern California a couple of months ago. There was a milk brand that I had never seen before. It was Ripple Milk. And I thought to myself, oh, wow, Ripple Labs, they've launched a real product. They're selling milk now. That's what I thought. Now, I knew, obviously, like, Ripple Labs hadn't launched a milk product, but it would make sense to me that they would get into something like that. Just because, what exactly have they launched again? They've got a stable coin that's on Ethereum. They've got,
they got Ripple payments that they just barely did, like, it was first of its kind. I mean, I'll credit where credit's due. First of its kind transaction, but I mean, for the valuation, basically the bottom line is that the XRP token just is not connected to the company. There is no mechanism or part of the tokenomics that the success of the company Ripple, it doesn't matter how much revenue it generates or how much profits it makes, it does not. There's a whole court case on it. I'll say it over and over again. XRP is not a security. I celebrated it with the rest of the XRP community when I had over 40,000 XRP, because I thought that it was going to send it to the moon, because that's what I was told. And I had done some research, and at the time, there was no RLUSD. So if Ripple was successful, then potentially, if value was going to be moved and they had to use XRP, then there was a case for a higher value XRP. But since RLUSD got launched and most of the value is being moved on ETH mainnet with RLUSD, because that's where 75% of the RLUSD is, there's no case for the price of XRP to go up, because there is no connection to the company. It's not a stock. It's pure speculation.
So, what I'm reading right now, Mike, about Ripple Labs, just a little bit about its evolution over the last decade, longer than a decade. Because if anyone isn't aware, Ripple has been around. It's one of the longest running crypto projects.
Yeah.
I think it was created back in 2012.
I think it was before Ethereum, because the rumor is that Vitalik was a what's that called, an intern at Ripple Labs, and was there for that, and basically that was when he decided that the whole smart contract thing, and he went and started Ethereum.
So yeah, think about the entire use case, right? So the early years of Ripple, in 2014 to 2019, it was RippleNet, and it was supposed to replace the SWIFT system. We all know that didn't happen. No. In 2020 to 2025, the SEC sued Ripple, alleging that XRP was an unregistered security, which of course, obviously it is. And now that was ruled by some type of activist judge to not be the case for retail, but that definitely is the case for institutions. And then you've got the modern era, 2025, 2026, after
which
I
found odd, because that's actually bullish for those institutions, because they technically own a stake of Ripple by owning XRP, but we as retail, we just get a shit token, that basically has no connection to Ripple. So it's like
It,
that was not to be celebrated.
I
Not for
don't think so.
retail.
I don't think so. It just made it legal for Ripple Labs to dump XRP on retail,
That's exactly what. But sorry,
unsuspecting.
I interrupted
Yeah.
you. Go ahead.
No, 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 unsuspecting retail too.
Yeah.
So look,
They
XRP has
retail threw a party. Well, Ripple threw a party and invited all the influencers and the community to a party to celebrate basically getting rugged, because it's there's absolutely no connection between the token and the success of Ripple.
So just think about this though. The XRP token has a nearly $90 billion market cap. And so you've got to ask yourself for what? Why? Like, what exactly are the products that they've shipped that justify that type of a market cap? And so there are only a couple of them. It's Ripple Payments, which was formerly Ripple Net. And
Yep.
this supposedly allows banks and fintech companies to send global payments in seconds. But you can do that with stablecoins. So why use
And
Ripple
any other
Payments?
number of ways. I mean,
Right.
you can use Canton, you can use a simple, like you said, a simple stable coin. You can be anywhere in the world and say, "Hey, Mike, can you send me a couple $100?" And I can send you USDC from my Coinbase account with zero fees instantaneously.
Right, exactly. And so here's the next product, their ODL or on-demand liquidity. So this is the most critical product for the XRP token, and this is also why no one would ever use it. So this is how it works. Instead of banks holding pre-funded accounts, those Vostro Nostro accounts in foreign
Yeah.
currencies, they would use XRP as a bridge asset, which on its face is a retarded idea. And so
Well,
this is the idea,
it's a volatile asset.
right?
So, and I've said this before, like if you send $1 billion, and I haven't done the math in a minute, but if you send $1 billion, which is nothing in traditional finance, you send $1 billion and the price shifts 1%. Isn't that like $10 million?
Yeah, that's a risk that you can't take. So
No, because
yeah,
if I'm like a major institution and I'm sending $1 billion to David, and only and it's $10 million short, you think he's just gonna be like, oh, that's the cost of doing business?
nope.
No, he's gonna be like, where's my $10 million, dude? You're short.
Yeah, no, you would never accept that. So here's an
No.
example of how that on-demand liquidity product is supposed to work, and this is exactly why no one will ever use it. To send dollars to Mexico, let's say, those
Mhm.
US dollars are first converted to XRP and then sent across the XRP ledger and then converted to pesos.
Yeah.
So, and that takes 3 to 5 seconds. So in those 3 to 5 seconds, depending on what the exchange rate is, you're likely going to lose value. So no one will ever use that product. And then there are only three other products that Ripple Labs has actually shipped. You've got
Well,
RL,
that's why they launched RLUSD,
right?
was
That's the
because
next one. Yeah,
that's what they were being told by banks and institutions is we're not going to use XRP to move value. That's why
right.
they launched RLUSD.
Exactly. Exactly. So they've got the RLUSD stablecoin product, which most of it doesn't even live on the XRP ledger. So that's really important. Most of it's
Literally
on Ethereum.
75% of it. Like I looked it up yesterday. It was
Right.
65. Now it's 75% of it exists on ETH mainnet. So it doesn't even use XRP for gas.
Exactly. Yeah. And then here are the last two products. Okay.
Whiskey, we can't help it, man. We can't
I
help it.
know, I know. And then there's a CBDC platform. So Ripple, I think that if Ripple has one use case, it would be to launch draconian CBDCs. That's basically what I think its use case is. So they shipped a dedicated private ledger for central banks, and over the last couple of years, they've got partnerships with countries like Palau, Montenegro, and several Asian nations to launch CBDCs in these places. So, okay, great.
Well,
Like,
you know what? Let me read this article and then we'll move on from XRP because I don't want to
good.
get bogged down on this.
It's so easy.
It's so easy. But if you take this article at face value, I mean, it says according to data on SoSo Value, the XRP funds logged 25.8 million in positive flows on Monday across three funds: Franklin Templeton, led with 13.6, Bitwise with 7.6 million, and Grayscale with 4.6 million. Capital is rotating back into crypto as a maturing asset class. Major institutions have recently selected XRP Ledger to test blockchain-enabled payment rails. Last week, Ripple announced that it had teamed up with JP Morgan, MasterCard, and Ondo Finance for a pilot transaction of tokenized U.S. treasuries across borders. Like they've teamed up and a pilot. There is already, established rails that are out there that are being actively used for tokenized assets. And again, this is very bullish for Ripple, but I do not see how that translates to the token, because there is nowhere in the tokenomics that, even if Ondo, MasterCard, and JP Morgan was doing hundreds of trillions of dollars of transactions, explain to me, I challenge any XRP holder out there, how does that translate to XRP price go up if all it is a cheap gas token?
It doesn't.
I challenge you. Please prove me wrong. I've said this for years now, and not a single one of these influencers has come forward. Not a single XRP holder has taken me up on my offer to come on live and debate.
Oh, dude, that would be great. I'd love to be able to talk to one of these like big XRP influencers.
100%.
That'd be awesome.
And if you can prove us wrong, I'll admit it. We've admitted it before with people in the chat. I mean, you can come on the show, but I mean, people in the chat have told us, hey, you're wrong about this, and this is why. And we look it up. And, yeah, no, you're right. We were 100% wrong. I have no problem admitting when I'm wrong. I know I'm not wrong on this.
I would love to be proven wrong. I just don't think that I would be proven wrong. And so that means that I would really, really like to have a conversation with some of these XRP influencers out there, because I think it would be great entertainment. It would be entertainment for me, to be completely honest.
Well, and because there's not a whole lot that I don't know about, Ripple and XRP. Because I literally spent like 3-4 years just learning about, Ripple and Brad Garlinghouse, and I followed daily. I followed the court case and Judge Torres and all the different people involved. It was pretty much all I did was just daily was learn about crypto. And specifically, XRP, because it was my largest holding at the time. And I sold it, when it pumped, when it hit $2. I didn't catch the top, but my average buy-in was 34 cents, and I sold it at $2. I made some good money, and I moved on to better projects. All right,
I don't blame you.
So next, we talked about it yesterday, not tomorrow, Thursday. Is that Clarity Act markup and discussion. So Senate negotiators have reached a compromise on the Clarity Act. The new deal bars bank-like yield rewards for stablecoins, but preserves activity-based incentives, potentially reshaping how DeFi protocols offer yield. It's a win and a loss. So we'll see how all that plays out. Starknet's strkBTC launch. Starknet has officially launched strkBTC, bringing ZK-powered shielded Bitcoin to its Layer 2 network, a major move for privacy-focused DeFi. What can you tell us about this, David? Because Starknet, I know that there was some hype about it for a while, and then it just freaking dropped off the freaking radar. And I'm just curious, how does this strkBTC with ZK-powered shielded Bitcoin, why is that bullish?
Yeah, so I actually met some of the founders of Starknet at UC Berkeley in 2022 and 2023 at these Berkeley blockchain meetups that I used to go to when I was living out there, and it was very, very interesting then. The Stark, those ZK proofs, but StarkBTC, this is supposed to be a non-custodial bridging protocol. And basically, it will allow users to quote unquote lock their Bitcoin on the mainnet and then mint a corresponding amount of StarkBTC on the Starknet layer 2. So this is a protocol for essentially creating derivatives of Bitcoin on the Starknet EVM chain layer 2. So you're going to get this ZK Stark security that uses zero knowledge proofs. People are really hot on those zero knowledge proofs, also referred to as Starks. And then you're going to have, so-called programmable Bitcoin. So once your Bitcoin is on Starknet, it's no longer static. You can use it on AMMs, lending protocols. You can use it as margin on perps dexes. But, look, if you hold StarkBTC on the Starknet layer 2, that is not spot Bitcoin. You're holding a derivative, and there's a lot of risk there. So, you've got smart contract risk, you've got, potentially, exploit risk, you've got potentially bridge risk. Maybe your Bitcoin could be slashed. Usually when you lock up your Bitcoin in a contract like that, there's the potential that it could be slashed and you could lose your Bitcoin. So yeah, I am just not excited about this. I would be excited about true DeFi on Bitcoin, maybe on the Lightning Network. We've been talking about that recently, but I would be most excited about true DeFi on the Bitcoin layer 1, not necessarily about locking up my Bitcoin so that I can get some derivative of it on a relatively small EVM chain layer 2. That's the Starknet layer 2. So yeah, the whole Bitcoin layer 2 narrative, trying to build DeFi utility into Bitcoin, I think that whole narrative, it might not be as hot as people make it out to be, simply because it would be much, much better to have true DeFi on Bitcoin, not have to lock up your Bitcoin to do something with it on an EVM chain.
Absolutely. It's and we've talked about, and we'll continue to talk about, just the difference between native Bitcoin on the Bitcoin network and these wrapped versions, these synthetic versions of Bitcoin like CBBTC and things like that. Because a lot of people out there, they just think like, oh, it's actually Bitcoin. It's just a wrapped version so that I can use it on on this network or that network. It is a IOU. It is basically a paper IOU of somebody that's actually holding real Bitcoin, and they're issuing you a paper IOU
Fake
version
Bitcoin. Let me get some F Bitcoin, FBTC.
Yeah. No, I mean that's really what it is, and so it loses a lot of the advantages of Bitcoin. So it's important to understand that. It's like, yes, you get exposure to the asset as far as the price, the price movement, and it allows you to do certain things when it comes to DeFi and being able to earn yield with your Bitcoin that you might not be able to do on mainnet. But it also exposes you to a lot of additional risk. So you need to understand, these different, aspects of these. It's just like how we talk about stable coins. Not all stable coins are stable coins just because they're called a stable coin. They're not all backed, in the same way. They're, not all pegged. It's you have to understand these assets, not just look at the yield you can earn. And because it says it's a stable coin, and you're going to earn 1,000% APY, you're like, oh shit, I can earn 1,000% APY on a stable coin. That's printing money right there. Until you realize that stable coin, is shit and it's not backed by anything, and it depegs and you lose everything.
So I could launch a stablecoin tomorrow, and this is how I would do it. I would create an EVK vault on Euler, a permissionless vault, and then deposit some asset into that vault. And then I could mint a coin against the assets in that vault. So I would take that coin that I would mint, peg it to 1, and then bada bing, bada boom, there's my stable coin. So, not all stables are created equal. The only stables that I think are actually true US dollar backed stablecoins are the ones that are backed by treasuries and cash. So if it's not backed one for one with cash or cash equivalents, I don't think it's a true stablecoin. I think it's more of like a wrapped representation of some yield generating activity.
Yeah.
And these wrapped tokens, they're arbitrarily pegged to one.
Yeah.
So is that a stablecoin? Well, not really. Not in my opinion, anyway.
No. All right. So next out the gate, Aave's legal and risk overhaul. So it looks like Aave gained 3% today after a U.S. court allowed the movement of $71 million in ETH, previously tied to the North Korean terrorism claims. So we covered this on the show, a while back, where under an old law from the Korean War, that the assets that were stolen, liquidity that was stolen from Aave and Kelp and all these different places, they some of it was frozen on different chains and different wallets and things like that, and they were able to recover some of it. It was being held under that old law because anything that is seized from North Korea goes to basically reparations for the victims of the Korean War. And so, of course, Aave and everybody that had their liquidity stolen was like, whoa, 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 we want our money back. And so they had to basically file an injunction, I believe is what it was, to stop the giving out of that liquidity to the victims of the Korean War that had nothing to do with this. And it looks like they were awarded by a court to where they could move 71 million worth of ETH. So that was bullish for those people who are trying to recover their liquidity. If it goes to those people, it is yet to be seen. I from what I've read so far, there none of the people have gotten their have been able to get their liquidity back. If last time we checked, I know last time David looked, a lot of those pools are still frozen.
So wasn't the Korean War like 75 years ago?
Yep.
Right? So
Yep.
why in the world would, victims of an exploit on a DeFi protocol have to give up those funds that should be getting returned back to them to people who are dead? Like
It was a way
victims
for
of
the
the
government
Korean
to get
War?
their hands on it. That's what it
I'm
boils down to.
That's what it sounds like. And, for me, permissionlessness, sovereignty, those things are extremely important. And if I see a DeFi protocol having to ask permission of a court to refund users, that doesn't exactly sound like permissionlessness to me. That sounds like just another CeFi protocol that is
Mhm.
beholden to some court somewhere. And if they're talking about, taking those stolen funds that they've been able to recover and giving them to people who died 70 years ago or their families,
Yeah.
dude, I would be furious if I was, one of the people who had been impacted by that exploit on Aave, on layer zero.
Mhm.
But yeah, I am not bullish on Aave any longer. It's just the reputational damage has been too great,
Yeah.
and that architecture is fundamentally flawed. So I just don't see how institutions are ever going to be able to trust Aave v3. And since Aave's risk manager and dev team exited as a result of that migration from v3 to v4 and some DAO controversy there on Aave, because all of their risk managers and dev team exited, I'm just not confident in the V4 protocol either. So yeah, Aave has some problems that they've still got to work out. Reputation takes years to build, and it can be lost overnight. And that's what we saw with Aave.
It's like integrity. It's and that's why I cling to it so hard. I don't want any inkling that, because you can be an honorable person your whole life. You tell one lie, you cheat once, you do anything, and that blemish
It's
erases
over.
every
Yeah.
good thing that you've ever done. And coming back to that is near impossible. And so it's why You cannot compromise, and that's why it's going to be such an uphill climb for Aave. It's because with the size of Aave, it's I don't understand why it is they didn't have more safeguards in place with the amount, with the billions and billions of liquidity that they were managing, that they didn't have like some kind of time lock or multi-sig, or where the liquidity wasn't just all pooled in one place. I mean, it's insane to me. But anyway.
Well, so on the layer twos on Aave on V3, the ETH markets have been unfrozen as of either today or maybe late yesterday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
What's the utilization rate?
So I was looking at that just a second ago. I can't see the utilization rate now. I'd have to jump back on over to Aave, but I can see that the ETH markets on the layer twos have been unfrozen, and it looks like the result has been outflows. Because look, if you've been stuck in one of these ETH markets,
oh yeah,
yeah.
Sorry,
So,
go ahead.
yeah, so they unfroze those markets, and it looks like we're seeing another another leg lower in Aave's TVL. Aave's TVL was nearly $30 billion just a couple of months ago. It's sitting at 15 billion right now. And I would be willing to bet that TVL is just going to move lower from here. Because think about this. If you're an institution, right, and you've got, a billion or multiple billions of dollars that you've got to allocate in DeFi, you're holding stable coins, you need to generate yield on them. How do you do that? Well, everyone should just put their liquidity on Aave, right? It's the largest money market in DeFi. That's what they all did. But now no one's ever going to do that again, because if you know that there's a potential for your capital to be locked up and you can't move it, well, then no one's ever going to trust that protocol ever again. So institutions are not going to be allocating on Aave v3. It's just not going to happen.
They're going to go to places that have risk mitigation tools in place.
Morpho, yeah.
The architecture of Morpho with the vaults, where the liquidity is split up, so where if one is compromised, it doesn't infect all of them. So they're going to look for a superior product, and I think that this was a big wake up call, a painful one, but a big wake up call for especially institutions, that not all protocols are built the same, and just because something has a bunch of TVL doesn't mean it's a superior product. It's I really think, and I think that's why we've been seeing Morpho's price move like we have, and we're starting to see some of these other protocols get some new life breathed into them. So it'll be interesting to see how this evolves.
Yeah, I think Morpho and Euler, the architectures of both Morpho and Euler are superior to Aave v3. Now, I don't know enough about Aave v4 because it's untested. It's that hub and spoke model. But all the liquidity is still on v3. And I think that it's just a matter of time until we see that liquidity on v3 really just, slowly drain away. I mean, it's basically been cut in half just over the last couple of months. I would expect that it will be cut in half again, and then cut in half again on v3. And you'll see those assets flow over to Morpho. You'll see them flow over to Euler. You'll see them flow to Fluid, these competing money markets in DeFi. Because think about this, if you're holding stables and you're an institution and you're legally mandated, you're a fiduciary, you've got to be able to generate the greatest amount of yield for your clients while taking the least amount of risk. And if you're going to allocate those assets to Aave and earn 3 points, 3.5% on those stables, maybe, that's US Treasury type yield, but you're not taking US Treasury type risk. You're taking a much, much, much greater level of risk, to get that same type of yield. It doesn't make any sense. So I would expect that institutions will migrate capital off of Aave and never go back. So
I think that Crispy has a good point. I think that a lot of these protocols, and it's something that I have noticed, Aerodrome, and the Meta 03 DEX, is they keep on talking about institutional grade. That it's almost becoming a buzzword. Where Morpho's been doing it. A lot of other platforms are starting to tout themselves as institutional grade DeFi. And I think a lot of that has to do is because they are purpose built like Canton. They're purpose built for institutions, not for retail. It's can retail use Morpho? Yes. Can they use Arrow? Yes. Can they use Canton? Arguably, yeah, you can build on it and you can launch DApps on it and things like that. But they are purpose built to basically upgrade traditional finance. They are wanting to be liquidity hubs and liquidity layers to digitize previously illiquid assets, like stocks, bonds, commodities, real estate, RWAs, things like that. Allow things to move much more fluid without these friction points. These are all pain points. Allowing automations of a lot of manual tasks that used to have to be done, as far as complying with compliance with government regulation, KYC, AML, things like that. If that can be done automatically and it doesn't take a person to look at a transaction and say, okay, yep, this is legit, go. Okay, this is legit, go. If you can have all of that automated and in real time as legislation and laws are passed, it can be upgraded. That is what institutions are going to do to remain compliant and to ensure that they aren't exposing themselves to potentially getting served by the SEC or the CFTC or the U.S. government or something like that for breaking a rule. So I really think that what Crispy's saying is true. That we're going to start seeing institutional grade DeFi, and that's where institutions are going to go.
Yeah, so if we're talking about the KYC AML stuff for DeFi protocols, it looks like the Clarity Act legislation creates a so-called dual track system where it's supposed to protect developers from being treated as banks, but place this massive compliance burden on intermediaries that connect users to those protocols. So yeah, I am just not bullish on this legislation. I know that most people are. Most people are like, oh, well, we're going to get this regulatory clarity. And then all of a sudden, we're going to see these massive inflows. I kind of think the opposite. I kind of think that this regulation is going to become onerous for builders because if you got to be able to comply with these regulations in order to be able to build legally in the United States and have legal American citizens using your protocol, well, then that means you've got to raise a lot of money just for compliance before you can even get off the ground. So I'm not bullish on that. I'm bullish on permissionless building.
Yeah.
And it seems as though the place where you can build permissionlessly is Southeast Asia and South America. That's what it looks like to me, not the United States. And that's not good, because the whole point of this Genius Act and this Clarity Act was to create the regulatory frameworks so that builders, entrepreneurs could build in the Web3 space in the United States and do it legally. And what has actually happened is this legislation has been drafted by banks. So banks are not incentivized to have, regular everyday people who might have a software engineering skill set to be able to build DeFi protocols and financial products. That's their industry. And so they want to gatekeep that as much as possible. And one great way to do that is make it very, very difficult to launch a new product legally because you need to raise multiple millions of dollars to be able to comply with regulation before you can even get started. So that's not a good thing.
The Clarity Act is a double-edged sword. So on one side, you have where, of course, governments, banks, things like that are wanting to keep their control and their power. And that's why they're drafting it the way that they are. On the other hand, you have it to where these institutions with all their liquidity and all the bullish stuff that everyone is talking about on X, and with the tokenization of this and that, and how stocks are coming on chain, and the upgrade of traditional finance, their hands are tied. They have to have clear rules and regulations to be compliant. They don't have a choice. If they're going to operate in the US, they have to have rules. They have to follow those rules. Same thing with the MiCA shit. That's over in the UK and over in Europe. Is institutions need to have those left and right limits, clear left and right limits, before they can get involved in any of this. Are they doing their best to front run as much as possible and build and get try to get a little bit of a head start on their competition? Absolutely. They'll play in the gray areas, but they're not going to cross that line until governments say, okay, this is now signed into law. That's when you're going to see the floodgates open, and you're going to see a lot of these institutions launching a lot of products and launching a lot of services.
So I've got a summary table that I want to read, about different categories under the Clarity Act, different categories of developers or like groups of builders. So if you're a pure developer, then under this 2026 Clarity Act, and I think it was marked up just the other day, I saw a draft of it on X. So if you're a pure developer, then you're exempt from KYC AML as long as your protocol doesn't hold user funds. Now, let's just pause there for a second.
Well, really quick, in the chat. So we got Richard Spellman. Welcome. I haven't seen your name before. I just want to say welcome. But how do I access the daily market wrap session? Right here. So just follow our channel on YouTube. It looks like you're on YouTube now. Follow our channel. If you're in, it's 1 p.m. If you're on Eastern, just like Ellie said, 4 p.m. Eastern. It doesn't cost anything. You don't need to sign up. Just show up. So there you go.
Yeah, so Richard, it's over there on YouTube. So just head on over to our YouTube channel, and you'll be able to see.
He's already there. He's already there. He just needs to subscribe and follow us so he gets the alerts and all that.
Right. So back to the Clarity Act stuff. So if you're a developer like me, right, and you want to build something really cool, and you're a pure developer, well, under the Clarity Act, you're exempt from KYC AML as long as your protocol doesn't hold user funds. Now, every protocol that I've designed, I've only designed 2. Both of them hold user funds, be it in a smart contract or on the Lightning Network. So if I'm building on an EVM chain, then those funds are going to be held in a contract. If I'm building on Lightning, those funds are held, quasi on a smart contract. Not really though, but it's still custodial. So that means that as a developer, I would not be exempt from KYC AML because my protocols hold user funds. So, no one in the United States is going to use the protocol if they've got to give an ID and pass some type of background check before they can legally use the protocol. So I don't think that's a good thing, KYC AML. That's number one. And then there are front-end interfaces. So they are going to need to implement risk-based monitoring if they facilitate trading, which is the vast majority of DeFi protocols, facilitate trading in some way. And of course, the centralized exchanges, they must perform full KYC AML before routing users to DeFi. And then you've got DAOs and validators. They're protected from money transmitter status under this language. And then you got...
And let me explain why really quick. So, these centralized exchanges are basically the on-ramps and off-ramps for liquidity, for retail and sometimes institutions. So if they know who it is, if you've been, gone through KYC and AML and all that, and they know who it is that owns an account or a wallet, then wherever you send that from there on out, they can track that. So they can see where your liquidity is going, what you're investing in. They can make sure that you pay your taxes, and they can control what it is that you do. And if you're trying to off ramp, and you've been a bad boy or a bad girl, potentially they can freeze your assets, and it's a lever of control. So anyway, sorry,
Yeah,
but
it's all about stealing money through taxes. You know, that's the only reason for this
it's always
KYC
about
AML.
money, and it's always about power, and it's always for our safety. It's always under the
Right.
guise of safety.
Well, we're going to protect the children.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
give
The
us, give
children.
us, just give us your ID so that we can track everything that you do with your money, and
Yeah.
then we're going to send you a bill. You know, at the end of the year, it's like
Oh,
fuck that.
I wish they would send us a bill. They're just like, we know how much you owe. We want you to guess how much you owe, and if you guess wrong, then we're going to come after you with fees and seize your assets and throw you in jail. But that's a discussion for the red pill.
It sure
Um,
is.
so before we get into the deep dives, there's a couple of other things that on Aerodrome I was wanting to touch on, and it plays into what I was talking about institutions. So, Slipstream V3 is verified institutional pools. So, this is going to be basically liquidity pools that are, that institutions are going to curate. Is my understanding. So, this is kind of like how Morpho operates, where they have a steakhouse, they have all these different financial institutions that curate the different vaults. So they're the ones that decide, what basket of assets that vault consists of to help mitigate the volatility and to ensure the profitability of the vault. And so, that's something that to keep an eye on is just this institutional push for these. And to an extent, I'm okay with that because these institutions are going to have a massive amount potentially of transactions, and that's how those of us in DeFi earn yield is through the amount of the volume, the amount of transactions that from swaps and different things like that. So if Aerodrome, and this is a huge shot in the dark, and I'm throwing the dice, it's a gamble, why I'm so bullish on Aerodrome is because with it going multi-chain and these institutional pools launching and a lot of these other services, trying to beef it up as a liquidity hub, it potentially could mean price go up because there is through the tokenomics, there is a connection between the token and the success of the protocol, through the earning of fees and things like that, and especially for the people that have BE Arrow, the locks that are soon going to be referred to as staked, Arrow. So that is kind of the long and the short of that. But what
So
do you
so
got for us?
I've got some interesting content, but I want to just touch on the Slipstream V3
Oh yeah,
permissioned
absolutely.
pools real quick. So those pools, those are derivative products, very similar to writing a put or selling a put.
Okay.
That's kind of sort of what those pools are. And so I just don't see institutions allocating big capital to
Mhm.
any liquidity pool because they're fundamentally flawed. So
Well,
here's why they're
I mean,
fundamentally
I,
flawed.
I
So when
think
you
it would depend on what type of pool.
so I don't see how they could ever allocate to a volatile asset paired with a stablecoin pool because the gamma
Well,
risk is just too
I
great.
just wonder if it's only going to be those types of pools. I just wonder if they're going to be pools of liquidity more like the vaults on Morpho or something like that, to where it's a place for them to just store liquidity and earn yield.
I don't think that's what it is though. I think that
We
Slipstream
don't know yet.
V3, well,
I mean,
so
it's an
so slip
unknown.
well, so Slipstream V3 is liquidity provision for the
Oh
purpose
yeah, yeah,
of
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just
facilitating swaps. On Morpho, those are vaults. There's no real swapping going on there. Different type of product. But the V3 pools. So when you provide concentrated liquidity, you take on gamma risk. That's your cost of volatility. Your gamma is your impermanent loss. So you take on that impermanent loss risk, and your reward, your compensation for taking on that gamma
I'm
risk is your
I'm not
fees.
willing to speculate. I'm waiting for more data before I make any any solid statements on this whole verified institutional pools, because I have a feeling that there's going to be some differences on this Slipstream V3, because I agree with you, but I know that Aerodrome and Coinbase and stuff like that, they're talking to these institutions, so they're going to create a product that those institutions are going to want. So is it going to
Maybe.
look different? It maybe, and that's all I'm pointing out, is that I agree with you, where it's yes, institutions probably aren't looking for the traditional pools that we're used to, but with this new V3, is there going to be a new architecture, or are they going to operate, those institutional pools going to operate differently? We don't know. So I'm pointing out the fact that if they are announcing verified institutional pools, that potentially it could be a new product or service that we're not familiar with yet. Like
So
I said,
my
it's a
understanding,
gamble.
my understanding after reading about it is that they're not different. These are CLMMs, so concentrated
So
liquidity
where did you read
AMMs.
about
Just reading about it on Google, but I know what V3 pools are, and that product itself is fundamentally flawed, especially when you pair with a stablecoin, because your gamma risk is just so great that unless the fees, the volume in that pool, which generates the fees, unless those fees are significant, it's very unlikely that over time you'll be profitable. You don't have a statistical edge when you provide concentrated liquidity and, importantly, pair with a stablecoin. So I just don't think that institutions are going to allocate capital to a fundamentally flawed product. Now they might allocate capital to a pool like a stablecoin paired with another stable,
That's
because
exactly what it's saying here. Is
yeah.
verified pools. Aerodrome is introducing verified pools that enable institutional interaction with DeFi through customized compliant ZK stacks and attestation-based access, often referred to within a broader MetaDex upgrade use case, ideal for stablecoin pairs looking for efficient, low slippage, and high APR environments. So again, it's a place for them to store liquidity, and with a stable pair, so it just gives deeper liquidity on Aerodrome.
So
So
that,
again,
so Mike, you're right. That is the only way I could see institutions allocating capital to these pools, if it's a stable paired with another stable,
yeah,
because
and that's all I was saying, is just it's that they Aerodrome being what it is, if they're announcing like institutional grade stuff, it's probably something that they talk to institutions and they're like, what would be valuable to you? If we're going to build out a product specifically for you, what do you want it to look like? And so, that, like I said, that's all I was really wanting to point out. And the fact that if it's still an if institutions take advantage of this offering and they store liquidity, and that liquidity is being, moved and potentially swapped, and, for ETFs or whatever, those fees, additional fees that are generated, across all these different chains when it goes multi-chain, for people that have staked Arrow and things like that, it means that we earn more yield. That's it. That's all I'm trying to say.
yeah, I don't know, man. I'm just like, the more that I hear the term like institutional this and institutional that, it's like, man, fuck institutions. Like that's really what I think
But
at the end of the day.
that's an emotional response, though, that I will not allow myself, because yeah, I say fuck the government and fuck institutions too. Am I going to let it affect my investing? No, because I know that I can say fuck the government and fuck institutions a lot better when I have money in my in my account. You know what I mean? And
Of
so,
course.
because yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, you can scream into the wind on a mountaintop and no one's going to hear you. If you're if you got a YouTube channel and you're sitting in a cabin in the woods and got fuck you money, you can be heard by a lot more people.
I hear you,
So
man.
you know
100%.
it's That's my only point is I just will not allow myself to let my personal feelings or emotions cloud my judgment. If I see a way that I can make money, especially off of the government and off of these institutions, I'm going to take it.
For sure. Yeah. So institutional inflows, people like to talk about that a lot, but at the end of the day, why does that mean number go up? That's the important thing. And digging into that and learning about how these tokenomics work for any project, that's what we
In
really
this
like.
case, it's just fees generated. In this case,
So, speaking of like institutional inflows along those lines,
mm.
um, I'm looking over here, Mike, at Coin Market Cap right now. And I'm just thinking to myself, there are a lot of protocols on this top 100 list of crypto projects.
Mm.
There are a couple of protocols that we've never done any deep dive research on, but that are in the top 30. So today, what I've produced for everyone is 3 pieces of research on 3 different protocols or projects in the top 30. So the first one is this one, Unas said LEO. This is number 12. So this is the 12th largest crypto project by market cap. It's a
Me and
nine.
Jeff actually talked about this because I was when I was going down this with Jeff on Crypto and Chill. I think it was like last Friday. I was like, "What the hell is this?"
Right, me
And we,
too.
yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad that you did a deep dive on it.
Yeah, so I want to learn about what this even is. This is a $9.3 billion market cap coin, and it's number 12. So that means if you exclude USDC and USDT, this is the 10th largest crypto protocol. And
That
I have
nobody's
no
ever
idea.
heard of or
I
talked
don't
about.
know what it is. you know? So we're going to learn about LEO today. The next one is actually going to be Bitcoin Cash, and then the third one is Litecoin. So I believe Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin are both forks of Bitcoin. Pretty sure, but not positive. So Bitcoin Cash, if you exclude stables, is the 12th largest crypto protocol. $8.7 billion market cap. So we're going to learn about Bitcoin Cash today. And then the last one here is Litecoin. So Litecoin, this is another multi-billion dollar market cap protocol, $4.4 billion market cap protocol. We're going to learn about Litecoin. So here are the 3, LEO, Bitcoin Cash, and LTC, Litecoin. And so I want to start off here with, I think it's LEO. I think that's what this one is. Oh, no, this is Litecoin. I want to start with Leo, this one. Here we go. A deep dive into the Leo tokenomics. Oh, it's not quite ready yet. So it looks like we're going to have to start off with Bitcoin Cash or Litecoin. Why don't we start with Litecoin? Let's just take a look at this. This could be interesting because this, I believe, did Litecoin make it onto the Sweet 16, Mike? Is it on that list?
I think it was on the list yesterday that you rattled off.
I think so. I don't recall though. I'm just going to ask real quick. Is Litecoin LTC on the CFTC SEC Sweet 16 list? I'm not sure if it is or not. I think it is. But if it is, then that would make, yeah, it is. So that would make Litecoin one of these so-called like official commodities, digital commodities. So let's learn a little bit about, I made a bunch of money trading Litecoin in the last bull market, but I didn't know anything about it back then. So I want to learn a little bit here about Litecoin, and then we'll take a look at Bitcoin Cash, and then we'll wrap things up with Leo. So Mike, let me know if you can't hear this.
14 years after its launch, Litecoin operates as an asset pulling in opposite directions. It maintains massive network activity and heavy security, yet it remains isolated from the speculative momentum currently driving the broader digital asset market. Baseline metrics are historic, processing 186,000 daily transactions, with hash rate hitting an all-time high of 3.827 petahashes. Yet price remains compressed between $57 and $59, and M1 adoption has stagnated below 5%. This creates a central tension. It is unclear how a 14-year-old proof-of-work payment rail competes in an ecosystem now dominated by high-throughput smart contract platforms.
Right, exactly. How in the world can Litecoin compete with other protocols like, let's say, Solana or Sui or even the layer twos on Ethereum? How can Litecoin compete for payments volume with these more efficient, higher throughput chains?
To navigate this environment, Litecoin is executing a massive structural bifurcation. The first move is a defensive one, securing its transparent base layer as a highly regulated, pristine digital commodity for institutional treasuries. The second move is a shift in development, focusing on an external Layer 2 ecosystem to utilize $4 billion in dormant liquidity within Web3 applications. Projecting Litecoin's 3-year outlook requires dissecting both this new corporate regulatory moat and the specific architecture of its Layer 2 pivot.
Hmm.
The network security foundation is built on heavy physical infrastructure. Industrial-scale mining operations continue to deploy script-specific ASICs to secure the ledger. This capital expenditure continues despite razor-thin profitability and a block reward that was previously reduced to 6.25 LTC. Raw security was converted into institutional value following a significant regulatory milestone on March 17, 2026. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission and the CFTC issued a historic joint interpretation regarding the classification of digital assets. Under this framework, because Litecoin utilizes open-source proof-of-work and lacks a central issuer or promised yield, it falls outside the scope of federal securities laws. This ruling permanently classified Litecoin as a digital commodity, providing it with a level of legal insulation that most alternative assets lack. This clarity enabled the rise of the corporate treasury movement, led by the NASDAQ-listed firm Light Strategy Inc.
Okay, Light Strategy Inc. I just want to pause it there for a second, and I want to get a ticker for Light Strategy Inc. Light Strategy Inc., the Litecoin corporate treasury company. I want to find out what its ticker is. What is its ticker symbol? Because I want to just take a look at the price performance of this Litecoin corporate treasury company. It's LITS, LITS. That's the ticker. So I just want to check in on LITS real quick. Light Strategy Inc. Here we go. And this is about what I expected. Looks pretty awful. And that's kind of what I think you should expect for something that holds Litecoin in its treasury.
I'll be right back. I'm going to get another cup of tea.
Sure. LITS. So if we take a look at LTC, that's Litecoin. Here's LTC. And this is on a daily. So Litecoin on the daily chart, to me, this thing, it's definitely at a level of support here. If we just grab a horizontal and throw this down, something like that. So it's at a level of support, but at the end of the day, this is a highly volatile digital asset with an unproven use case that has done nothing but bleed value, especially if you price this in Bitcoin terms. So if, a corporate treasury is holding Litecoin, that is an altcoin that is more volatile than Bitcoin. And so if it's more volatile than Bitcoin, it had better be outperforming Bitcoin because Bitcoin has a lower level of volatility. So when I'm taking a look at this chart of Litecoin in Bitcoin terms, and I see that it has done nothing but lose value. Litecoin has done nothing but lose value in Bitcoin terms, basically for the entirety of its existence. Well, then how in the world can a corporate entity justify allocating its treasury to a dog shit altcoin? That makes no sense at all. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Light Strategy executed a $100 million PIPE offering, acquiring exactly 929,548 LTC for its balance sheet. The firm then wrote covered call options against its treasury, generating $600,000 in gross premiums in Q2 2026.
Yeah, well, okay, great. So they got 600K in premiums for selling calls against their Litecoin, but they spent $100 million of real money to buy the LTC that has done nothing but lose value since they bought it. So the 600K in premiums, well, that's a drop in the bucket compared to how much they've lost on this corporate treasury in the first place. So it just, great. They're selling covered calls. That's not enough. Not enough.
Infrastructure firms like Luxfolio are replicating this model, targeting 1 million LTC in reserves as a liquid alternative to
What
newer.
model losing money?
What's that, Mike?
I said, what model losing money?
I know. It's like these corporate treasury companies, this doesn't.
Have you seen what that company over there is doing? They're losing massive amounts of money. You know what we should do? Let's try that.
All right. Look, they spent 100. You know how you make $1 million, as a corporate treasury company? What you do is first you raise $100
Start with
million.
$1 billion.
Right. But first you raise 100 million and then you buy Litecoin with it. And then when
Yeah.
you're down 99%, hey, there you go. There's your million.
Well, that's like that meme. How do you become a millionaire in crypto? Start out as a billionaire.
The absolute regulatory certainty of the base layer establishes Litecoin as a foundational corporate reserve asset,
No, it doesn't.
distinct from its history of retail speculation. While the transparent base layer.
So, okay, let's just push back against the framing of that comment from the narrator here for a second. Do you really think that just because the SEC CFTC joint statement from on high in that ivory tower of theirs, do you think that they can, by fiat, regulate Litecoin into becoming this high quality digital asset just by saying that it's a digital commodity? I think the answer is no.
Layer is gaining institutional traction, the network's optional privacy architecture faces significant friction. The MWeb upgrade, activated in 2022, was designed to conceal transaction amounts and balances to improve fungibility. However, in 2026, MWeb transactions remain marginalized, accounting for less than 5% of total network activity. Much of this suppression is driven by the European Union's Markets in Crypto Assets regulation, which reached its final implementation deadline in July 2026. MiCA enforces strict anti-money laundering and travel rule standards.
Yeah, so just think.
It's for our safety, David. It's for our safety.
Taxes. That's all it is. They just need, because they can't steal from you if they can't see your transactions.
Well, and they can't control you unless they can, shut off your money.
Right, exactly. It's part of this tax matrix, and the Europeans are the worst, man. That MiCA framework is just horrible.
Requiring full transparency. Because MWeb obscures transaction data, it creates a compliance bottleneck. Regulated exchanges have largely disabled MWeb functionality, routing volume exclusively through the transparent base layer. Beyond regulation, the network recently faced technical challenges while managing these complex cryptographic features. In April 2026, the network experienced a critical zero-day vulnerability exploit targeting the MWeb extension, forcing a 13-block chain reorganization. This prompted the emergency release of core version 0.21.5.5 to stabilize block data indexing and prevent malicious zero-sum transactions.
Okay, so let's pause here for a second. If you're an institution, how in the world can you allocate capital to Litecoin if it was just exploited on a zero-day attack? Like, you can't.
Well, not responsibly. You'd be open yourself for freaking all kinds of lawsuits. If you use the assets under management to invest in something that was obviously had exploits.
Yeah, you can't do it.
Liability.
Right.
The operational risks exposed by the April exploit, combined with the MiCA regulatory blockade, illustrate the difficulty of integrating advanced features directly into the legacy protocol. This friction explains why the roadmap has pivoted toward external scaling to find new utility. This pivot is a response to an existential threat from competing networks that offer faster processing and native smart contracts. This matrix shows the competition in 2026. Bitcoin Cash's Layla upgrade introduced 2-minute blocks and base layer scripting, while Solana continues processing over 65,000 transactions per second. High-throughput platforms are currently capturing market share for retail checkout and rapid settlement. To remain competitive, the ecosystem has launched LitVM, the Litecoin virtual machine. The engineering goal is to connect Litecoin's UTXO-based accounting system to an Ethereum virtual machine environment. This stack visualizes the April 2026 LitVM testnet. It uses the Litecoin UTXO base layer for finality, verifying state transitions via Bitcoin OS zero-knowledge proofs. These rollups bridge native LTC trustlessly, creating a parallel EVM environment while maintaining the base layer's 14-year uptime.
Okay, so think about the complexity of this. This is very complex. So they're going to use the UTXOs and then bridge it with ZK proofs to an EVM environment. Like, why would any developer want to build on something this complex? Why not just build directly on the EVM? Or why not build directly on top of UTXOs, like on Lightning or something like that? Why go through all of this rigmarole? Complexity might look clever, but simplicity is better.
Well, I mean, the more complex the thing gets, the more potential there is for exploits.
Right.
The
Exactly.
more, with depending on the architecture, the more times you have to bridge, and the more times you have to do all these different things.
Exactly.
It's just more, entry points.
Right, and more points of failure, potential points of failure.
Yeah. I mean, we saw what happened with with Aave. It started with layer 0, went to Kelp, ended up going to Aave and a bunch of other, and that was from one. It's just a chain reaction from one interoperability protocol.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm looking for simplicity, not complexity.
There's an art. There's an art to simplicity. Just a nice, clean architecture.
Keep it simple, stupid.
Exactly.
Architecture provides a path for decentralized finance, including lending protocols, automated market makers, interacting directly with LTC holders. It also facilitates the tokenization of real-world assets, which are then secured by Litecoin's heavy proof-of-work hash rate. Currently, over 50 development teams are deploying on the testnet in anticipation of the mainnet activation. LitVM provides the technical architecture to move native LTC into smart contracts, enabling its use in decentralized finance and yield-bearing applications. Beneath these new developments, the network's value remains tied to its fixed monetary policy and the 84 million coin supply cap. This policy is approaching another milestone, the fourth halving event, estimated for July 27, 2027. This timeline tracks the mathematical compression of the issuance schedule. In July 2027, the block reward drops from 6.25 to 3.125 LTC.
Okay, so Litecoin is not Bitcoin. Litecoin does not have a history of number go up over time. Bitcoin does. So Bitcoin might be able to survive the next 2 halving events if the number continues to go up. Litecoin, on the other hand, think about this. If we get past that next halving event and Litecoin's price in dollars has not gone up exponentially, well, at a certain point, miners who are currently incentivized to keep their machines on and pay for electricity and pay to refresh their machines, their ASICs, they get paid based on the halving rewards, those block rewards. If those block rewards get cut in half overnight in July 2027, who's to say that these miners with their ASICs don't just decide to turn off their machines because it no longer makes sense for them to pay the electricity to keep them on? So, this whole idea of a halving, it only makes sense if, number one, there's a ton of transaction volume on the chain, and number two, people need to use it. People need to use it because if the block rewards eventually just trend to 0, the only way that miners are going to be incentivized to keep their machines running is if there's a ton of transaction volume. If that's not the case, then Litecoin dies. So just think about that.
This supply reduction collides with new demand drivers from Layer 2 and corporate treasuries building in the ecosystem. The asset now functions via 2 distinct demand drivers, the passive accumulation of corporate treasuries and the active utility of the LitVM Layer 2. While treasuries absorb base layer supply, LitVM functions as a liquidity sink for programmable applications and
Yeah, but neither of those two things are true. Like, there are not big corporate treasuries buying Litecoin. There are 2 corporate entities that are basically retarded for buying this. That's number one. And number two, LitVM isn't out of testnet. There's nothing built on it. So there's no transaction volume there. So both of those two things are not a reason why Litecoin will perform well into the future.
Yield. The risk remains that if LitVM fails to attract sustained developer activity, the asset may struggle to remain relevant against
Right.
high-performance competitors.
Right.
If the Web3 pivot is successful, Litecoin will transition its legacy as digital silver into a role as a foundational, highly regulated.
Yeah, so digital silver, I never thought of Litecoin as digital silver because I don't think of Bitcoin as digital gold because it's not. It's not digital gold, and Litecoin is not digital silver. So now that I know a little bit more about Litecoin, it sounds like an interesting short opportunity to potentially just go to zero and fade into obscurity, like the majority of the browsers during the browser wars or the operating systems during the operating system wars. I think we're seeing the blockchain wars. And I think that there's a lot of chains that are going to fade away and
Well,
become dinosaurs over the next several years.
Crispy has a great point, with, when we were talking about simplicity, freaking, if you remember Google and Yahoo, Yahoo was, that 800-pound gorilla, and that's where everybody went. And Google came along with that plain white screen that just said Google with a search. And Yahoo had the news, and they had all these pop-ups, and they had all this bullshit, and it annoyed the shit out of people. And
Yeah.
so everyone started using Google because it was simple, it was clean.
It's important.
Yeah, it's very important. Just ease of use.
Yeah, simplicity is super important. Okay, so let's switch gears here a little bit and let's talk about LEO. So I'll be honest, I have next to zero knowledge about LEO.
I know
So
nothing.
this is I know nothing about LEO.
other than just in a very general sense what it is, but
I don't even really know what it is. I mean, all I know really is that it's, excluding stables, the 10th largest crypto project by market cap with nearly a $10 billion market cap. So yeah, but it's only got $1.1 million in 24-hour trading volume. Like, that's weird. That's a very, very small number. Very, very small. Because I mean, take a look at its competition here. We're talking about, $500 million, $250 million in 24-hour trading volume. But this one, which comes in at number 10 by market cap, excluding stables, this one only 1.1 million in 24-hour volume. That's very, very little. So
it's basically from Bitfinex. If you just kind of want the very short answer, it's a utility token for Bitfinex.
Okay, so let's take a look at the token itself just real quick, because this actually doesn't look horrible. So if we take a look at this on a weekly, so here's the weekly. Since 2020, this actually looks pretty darn good. And then if we price this in Bitcoin terms, okay, so if we price it in Bitcoin terms, not so hot. But just in US dollar terms, looks okay. Let's learn a little bit about LEO, L-E-O.
In December 2025, the cryptocurrency exchange Bitfinex abruptly eliminated all spot trading fees on its digital platform. By conventional crypto economics, a token whose primary value proposition is offering fee discounts should have collapsed immediately once those fees vanished. Instead, Eunice said LEO instantly rallied 11%. Following the zero fee announcement, LEO climbed steadily through the first quarter of 2026, reaching a new all-time high. That rally pushed its market capitalization to $9.37 billion, making it the 9th largest cryptocurrency globally. However, this multi-billion-dollar valuation exists alongside an anemic trading volume of less than $500,000 per day. This extreme illiquidity points to a supply held almost entirely in cold storage by whales and institutional entities, rather than being actively traded on the open market. LEO is specialized
Not
financial
good.
proxy for iFinex,
Huge red flag.
corporate parent of both Bitfinex and the stablecoin issuer Tether. It functions as a synthetic equity instrument, providing token holders with mathematically enforced exposure to the conglomerate's top-line revenue. Anchored by three specific pillars: a permanent deflationary burn engine, a strategic real-world asset pivot, and a massive legal catalyst. The current market price suggests a valuation model driven by the inescapable mathematics of top-line revenue, burning a fixed supply asset, operating independently of the token's actual utility to consumers. The structure of this model was born out of a profound liquidity crisis that hit iFinex between 2018 and 2019. International law enforcement authorities seized $850 million from a shadow payment processor used by Bitfinex, effectively freezing the exchange's fiat gateways and creating a massive deficit on its balance sheet. To recapitalize the enterprise without diluting existing shareholder equity, iFinex launched the Leo token, raising
They printed money.
Oh my God, this is so funny, man. So basically,
Uh,
like they had nearly what is it, $850 million, nearly $1 billion of probably Tether just frozen by law enforcement. And so to recapitalize their business, they minted a meme coin. Well, not quite a meme coin, because it looks like it gains by holding it, it looks like you gain some exposure
this
to the
this is starting to
revenues.
sound like running through a field of dildos.
Oh
It's just
God,
like
this
you're
it's
just
just
bound to get.
horrible.
It's just a matter of time. You're going to get fucked.
But you guys see, like, over the last couple of weeks, we've been taking a look and running through deep dives on, the protocols in the top 100. And, what we're starting to learn is that there's a lot of garbage here, like a
Yeah,
lot. And
yeah,
if the number 10 protocol coin by market cap is like some type of synthetic equity that was minted out of thin air to recapitalize a business after law enforcement agencies froze nearly $1 billion of their capital, like,
yeah. Well,
really?
and not to mention the majority of the token is held by whales, and and the creator of the token that they can dump anytime that they want. I mean, this is the same issue, that aspect, not the whole thing, but that's the same issue that we were talking about with Ripple. They have a billion tokens a month that unlock from escrow that they can choose to sell or relock. It's just I don't like, and it's one of the reasons I'm so bullish on Canton is it was a fair launch. The team and there was no VC held tokens. The team didn't keep any tokens. 100% of the tokens at the time of launch went out, and it's a model that I think should be for any legit project.
And so, isn't this like part of the Tether ecosystem in some way? I'm sure that it'll tell us if we can when we continue on with this research video here. But how's that audit going, Tether? I thought that Tether was going to get audited by one of the big four auditing firms at some point, or
Well,
two of them.
they had one company that was doing their pre-audit, and then they later on this year they were going to do the full audit, the full official audit. So one was going to be internal, so that they could, which okay, cool, no issue. But yeah, I haven't heard a peep out of any of that since we reported on it, and since the news came out, we reported on it.
Well, the reason why that's interesting is Tether's got a funky history of,
Yes,
some kind of shady stuff. So,
yes,
where's the audit, Tether? Huh?
$1 billion in just 10 days. To attract that capital, the company established a foundational covenant in its 2019 white paper.
Okay.
iFinex is
Hold on a
contractual
second. Let me
since
back this up.
2019.
Isn't this what was the name of the Wolf of Wall Street's firm, that scam company that he created? Oak something? Oakmont Stratton Oakmont.
Oh,
And
yep. All right, yeah,
didn't he use like a
yep,
lion or
yeah.
something?
He did.
Dude, ugh. So whenever I see a protocol coin that has like a really bad name, kind of like you remember overnight finance,
Yeah,
that one, as
yeah,
in all your money went to zero overnight, like,
yeah.
or like this, it looks like they basically cloned the Stratton Oakmont lion. Like,
Mhm.
white paper. iFinex is contractually obligated to dedicate a minimum of 27% of its consolidated monthly gross revenues to purchasing LEO from the open market and permanently destroying it. This differs significantly from traditional stock buybacks.
Okay, so that is actually a legit mechanism. So that's legit, and that probably explains its price performance.
As shown in Pipeline A, corporate buybacks are typically funded by net income. Net income is reduced by executive bonuses, capital investments, or legal costs, leaving very little for buybacks. Pipeline B shows LEO's advantage. By pegging the burn to top-line gross revenue, token holders are completely isolated from iFinex's internal operational costs.
So this is actually really interesting, Mike, because if we can just put aside all the problems with this token and its launch in the first place, if we can just set that aside for a second, this mechanism, this actually does make the LEO token look a hell of a lot like synthetic equity that pays you like a 27% dividend. That's what this is starting to look like a little bit.
Verified on-chain data from May 2026 confirms the relentless efficiency of this engine over the past 7 years. Approximately 8% of the initial 1 billion token supply has already been permanently removed from circulation. This creates a price-agnostic daily buy pressure of roughly $70,000, executed continuously by the parent company. As long as the iFinex ecosystem generates top-line revenue, the token supply faces a mathematically inescapable contraction, creating a permanent floor for the token's value. If gross revenue is the engine of LEO's value, it seems counterintuitive for Bitfinex to intentionally eliminate its spot trading fees. In practice, the zero-fee model functions as a loss leader, driving massive aggregate volume to the platform by removing barriers to entry. This volume creates deep liquidity for iFinex's other monetization channels, including margin lending interest, derivatives funding, and high-margin over-the-counter desks. Most importantly, it supports a strategic shift toward the issuance and trading of tokenized real-world assets. This sector is projected to exceed $100 billion by the end of 2026, creating a massive new stream of institutional fees. Bitfinex Securities is leading this expansion. In May 2026, regulators in Kazakhstan increased the platform's operational limit to $490 million.
It's very nice in Kazakhstan.
Yes.
Who the fuck cares about Kazakhstan?
I don't know if that's bullish.
I know. Like,
in Kazakhstan.
hey, so we just got this
clock
banking
radio.
license.
Because I get clock radio, you get clock radio.
Enabling larger issuances of tokenized bonds and private equity.
In
The
Kazakhstan.
company has also established itself as the technological backbone for El Salvador's sovereign digital debt, including the highly anticipated volcano bonds. The fees generated from these institutional tokenizations and secondary market trades now flow directly into the 27% burn engine.
You know what? Look, as much as I want to just joke about Kazakhstan, I really like El Salvador. And this 27% burn engine, it
Dude,
looks like
That
it looks
that
good.
that president, with Bitcoin, he was able to churn a massive debt that El Salvador had to where basically erase the debt plus some.
Yeah, and not just
Because
that.
he was buying Bitcoin when people were calling him an idiot. I remember back when Bitcoin was like 16, 17, 18K, he was buying Bitcoin. And so, everybody was calling him an idiot. And then, when Bitcoin pumped, like 6 or 7x, all of a sudden he was a genius.
Well, hey, you know what? He did a hell of a lot more than that. Not only was he a financial genius, but he was also able to completely clean up that country.
Yeah.
And you know how he did it? They locked up the bad guys.
Yeah, imagine that.
Like, imagine that. The guys out there committing violent crimes, they locked them up, and then all of a sudden, there weren't any more violent crimes. Huh.
Surprise.
Replacing the lost revenue from traditional retail spot trading. Beyond its revenue-linked burn, the Leo white paper contains a second catalyst that creates a unique form of litigation optionality. In August 2016, attackers breached Bitfinex's security, siphoning 119,754 Bitcoin from the exchange's hot wallets.
Oh, wow.
After years of laundering attempts, federal authorities arrested Ilya Lichtenstein and Heather Morgan in 2022. This led to the recovery of over 94,600 of the stolen Bitcoin, which is currently held by the Department of Justice. These assets are now part of the U.S. Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, pending the conclusion of complex legal forfeiture proceedings. Under its white paper mandate, iFinex is absolutely obligated to use 80% of any recovered funds to market buy and destroy Leo tokens.
Oh, what? So that's important, man. So it sounds like the Department of Justice is holding 95,000 Bitcoin that were stolen from iFinex. So if iFinex gets those Bitcoin back, they've got to use 80% of that to buy their LEO token. Am I understanding that correctly? That's
I'd want to fact check that.
Me too. Me too. But like, just on its face, that is pretty interesting to me. So, this Leo token is actually starting to sounds just like a synthetically minted piece of true equity. Like all other tokens are not really equity. This
No.
sounds like synthetic equity.
At current May 2026 valuations, 80% of the seized wallet represents $6.1 billion earmarked solely for destroying Leo.
Wow.
Deployed over a strict 18-month window, this translates to $11.2 million of daily buy pressure.
Dude,
In a
if that ever happens, if that's real, and if that ever happens, this token would go crazy.
market where Leo's daily trading volume averages only $479,000, this scale of buying is unprecedented.
Right.
An $11.2 million automated daily buy order would instantly overwhelm a $479,000 order book.
Yeah. So I think that's supposed to be a green candle.
Rapidly depleting the available supply.
I know, right?
This creates an environment where the exchange is forced to bid progressively higher to fulfill its mandate, ensuring aggressive upward price action as order books are annihilated.
Right.
The 60% premium currently observed in Leo's price reflects the institutional market front-running this mathematically guaranteed supply shock.
Wow.
For all the certainty of its deflationary mechanics, Leo remains vulnerable to the fundamental risks of a proxy token. It has zero decentralized utility.
Right.
Its value is entirely dependent on the regulatory and operational survival of its parent company.
Just like equity, it's just
Yeah.
like sounds
A
just
stock.
like equity. Yeah,
Just like a
sounds just
stock.
like a stock. Yeah.
In March 2026,
Hold
a
on,
federal judge in
that's actually a freaking, a good point. What happens if fucking they get served with a fucking Wells notice?
Well, I mean, who knows? Because that token didn't make it onto the Sweet 16.
Well,
So
but what we've been saying, with like you're saying, this Leo token, 100%, sounds like a security. So, even with the, I just want to make sure we're pointing out, both the good and the bad. And yeah, there's definitely some bullish aspects to this, with that, those Bitcoin holdings and, with their 27% buyback and burn and, all of that stuff. But, if, the SEC decides, oh yeah, this is a security, what happens?
yeah, but they're operating out of Kazakhstan. Like they don't care. Well, maybe
That's
they
true.
do because they need to be able to get that 95,000 BTC back from the DOJ, and the DOJ
Yeah.
might not give it back. We would
Well,
need
and
to.
what if the U.S. government decides, you know what? Look at this nice little neat package that we can just serve them with a Wells notice, and all of a sudden, all that Bitcoin.
But how many BTC are in the strategic reserve right now? Isn't it like 200 something thousand, 300,000, something like that? 280, I think, something along those lines. So if we're talking about 95,000 Bitcoin of that stack is
Yeah.
actually stolen from iFinex, do you think there's any way in hell that the federal government is going to return those 95,000
Oh.
BTC to iFinex?
Especially if they have a nice, neat little legal package to where they can just say, "Oh, you're sold an unregistered security in the U.S. So that's part of the investigation. We're going to keep that seized, and until the legal issues get sorted out. Well, like they did with the the Aave money, the Aave liquidity because of North Korea. somebody somewhere saw an opportunity. Oh, look, this came from North Korea, so we as the government, we can seize this and do with it what we want. And luckily, a judge was like, no, bullshit, and at least release some of it. So
I just don't see the federal government under a Trump presidency, sending like what a third of the strategic Bitcoin reserve to a company that seems like it might be headquartered in Kazakhstan. Like, no way, no way.
New York granted class action certification in a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit against Bitfinex and Tether. The suit alleges that Ifinex manipulated the prices of Bitcoin and Ethereum during the 2017 market cycle using unbacked USDT. If the court enforces multi-billion-dollar judgments or restricts Tether's operations, Ifinex's revenue streams could be instantly impaired. Any drop in consolidated revenue mechanically shuts down the 27% burn rate that supports the token's value.
Right.
Without that corporate buyback, Leo becomes a stranded asset with no underlying bid support. Long-term forecasting models for Leo show a binary split. One path leads to aggressive price appreciation through compounding deflation, while the other shows an immediate collapse triggered by legal failure.
I think that this is probably more likely because there's no way that the DOJ is going to return a third of the U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve to Ifinex. There's no way that's happening. So, basically, if that doesn't happen, and remember, this is like synthetic equity. So if we would need to really do a deep dive on Ifinex and find out more about, how they performed as a business over the last, let's say, decade, if it's been around for a decade. But there are big risks here.
The asset's future is a struggle between the relentless compounding of daily buybacks and the existential threat of federal prosecution. Ultimately, Eunice said Leo shows that in a maturing market, the inescapable gravity of top-line revenue burning fixed supply equity can generate more value than any specific user discount.
So if there wasn't the regulatory problems for this token, the model makes a lot of sense. Using revenues to burn and buy back and burn your own token, treating it more like equity. I like that. I like that model quite a bit. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Hype, just a little bit. Protocol revenues used to buy back and burn tokens. That was pretty interesting. Okay, so the last couple of minutes here that we've got, let's take a look and learn a little bit more about Bitcoin Cash. Now, why do I want to learn more about Bitcoin Cash? Well, the last couple of protocols that we've taken a look at have all been in the top 100. So we just learned about LEO. We learned a little bit about Litecoin earlier, and Litecoin is number 22. Now we're going to take a look at Bitcoin Cash, which is number 14. So we're putting together all this research on the top 100 protocols and projects in crypto, just so that we can find out which of these are investable and which are not. So let's take a look and learn a little bit about Bitcoin Cash.
Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today. We're going to be unpacking one of the most profound structural and economic transformations in the entire cryptocurrency space, the 2026 metamorphosis of the Bitcoin Cash network. Seriously, if you love understanding the deep mechanics behind massive technological shifts, you are in the exact right place. Just think about this for a second. What actually happens when a decentralized blockchain matches Visa's transaction clearing speeds, becomes definitively 100% legally compliant, and still costs less than a single penny to use? Well, you get a network that is completely evolved from a straightforward peer-to-peer cash system into a highly scalable, enterprise-grade decentralized finance powerhouse. It's a real game changer. So here's our roadmap for today. We'll cover the 2026 metamorphosis, the Lila network upgrade, and real-world commerce and TradFi. Then we'll move into mining economics and markets, a definitive digital commodity, and finally, the next great challenge. Let's jump right into Section 1, the 2026 metamorphosis, rebuilding the engine. The network has successfully decoupled from its earlier existential struggles. There is a pretty stark structural contrast we need to talk about here. Back in the legacy era, the protocol was purely focused on being a low-fee, peer-to-peer cash network. But the 2026 era? It's a highly programmable, wildly scalable, decentralized finance platform. The really fascinating part is how the protocol aggressively expanded its capabilities into complex smart contracts without ever abandoning its highly parallelized UTXO foundation, meaning it can handle immense transaction volume without hitting those global state bottlenecks that constantly congest account-based networks like Ethereum. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 2, the Lila Network Upgrade, unlocking Turing-complete smart contracts. Before we even get to the magic of 2026, we have to recognize the massive jump in the precursor metrics from May 2025. The network just aggressively stripped away major artificial constraints. Contract computation jumped from a maximum of 201 operations to a robust 700 bytes per input. Stack element sizes expanded 19 times over. And crucially, number precision saw a staggering 1,250x increase, native right up to 10,000 bytes. This laid the absolute cryptographic groundwork. Without these exact foundational enhancements, the highly complex DeFi routing and automated market makers of 2026 simply would be impossible to execute on-chain. And that sets the stage perfectly for the Lila upgrade, which officially activated on May 15th, 2026 via the Bitcoin Cash Node version 29.0.0 client. This was a monumental network upgrade. It systematically restored 100% of the original Bitcoin script functionality that was severed over a decade ago. It mathematically renders the cash virtual machine fully Turing complete, so it perfectly matches and actually exceeds the smart contract capabilities of the pre-2017 legacy Bitcoin network. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how they pulled it off with the 4 pillars of Lila. First up, bounded loops. This mathematically prevents infinite loop attacks while still allowing for repetitive operations. Second, function invocation. This allows code reuse that cuts complex contract gas fees by an incredible 50 to 90%. Third is pay to script, which standardizes non-custodial safety overrides and emergency kill switches. And finally, bitwise operations, which gives the network the ability to natively evaluate complex payment rules. These highly technical proposals translate directly into incredible real-world innovations, like the 128-bit quantum-secure quantum root architecture and the lever programmable streaming payments protocol. Now, beyond all those smart contracts, Lala totally revolutionized the physical user experience. The legacy block time meant a 10-minute wait for an initial confirmation. And let's be real, standing around staring awkwardly at your phone in silence at a checkout counter for 10 minutes? Yeah, not exactly the future of finance. The 2026 era brings a new 2-minute block target. When you combine that with the network's native zero confirmation architecture and Avalanche pre-consensus, you get an instant scan to receive finality that genuinely rivals Visa's clearing speeds. Let's move to and see how this builds directly into global merchant adoption. Section 3, Real-World Commerce and TradFi from code to global checkout counters. Think about the fact that 39% of surveyed US merchants are now actively accepting cryptocurrency at checkout. That's according to a comprehensive 2026 survey by the National Cryptocurrency Association and PayPal. The demand for permissionless, low-friction settlement is fundamentally changing from this quirky niche offering into a standard commercial integration. We're seeing this adoption manifest beautifully right at the intersection of physical sovereign hubs and massive traditional finance. Take St. Kitts and Nevis, officially integrating crypto into their 2026 Citizenship by Investment program and their massive physical real estate projects. Look at North Queensland, which maintains the highest per capita physical merchant adoption globally. But then look at the traditional payment processors. PayPal's corporate restructuring into PayPal Digital Inc. directly exposes these native assets to 439 million global users. And Stripe, they're utilizing open issuance infrastructure to let merchants use multi-chain settlement to completely bypass those punishing 150 basis point credit card fees. It's huge. Section 4, Mining Economics and Markets, Sustaining the Secure Network. It's time to transition over to the physical infrastructure that actually keeps this whole ecosystem secure. I want you to think about a truly microscopic number for a second, $0.0017. Less than a fifth of a cent. That is the network's median transaction fee. Despite this astonishingly low cost, the network is processing an impressive rolling average of over 772,000 transactions every single day. This proves extreme tangible economic efficiency, showing that the network is entirely unburdened by the crippling congestion that routinely plagues other contemporary Layer 1 architectures. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the profitability premium. When comparing daily mining revenue per terahash, Bitcoin Cash is yielding about 4.1 cents compared to legacy Bitcoin's 3.9 cents. In a post-halving environment, this consistent 5.1% profitability premium over legacy Bitcoin is absolutely vital. It acts like a magnet for global mining syndicates. It stabilizes the network's highly secure 8.5 exahashes per second hash rate, completely ensuring the chain remains fiercely resistant to attacks. Section 5, a definitive digital commodity, the regulatory checkmate. Because for traditional capital allocators, superior technology is honestly largely irrelevant if you don't have absolute regulatory certainty. Impartially reporting on the regulatory landscape here, the industry received a landmark piece of joint interpretive guidance from the SEC and the CFTC in March 2026. The agencies explicitly defined digital commodities as assets linked to the programmatic operation of a crypto system, completely separate from the managerial efforts of others. Crucially, they explicitly listed Bitcoin Cash as an exempt digital commodity. Because the network is completely decentralized with no central issuer or executive board pulling the levers on monetary policy, it effortlessly avoids the securities designation, definitively removing that massive existential regulatory threat. If we walk through the timeline of events, you can really see the massive institutional momentum this created. In March, we get that explicit digital commodity classification. By Q2, Grayscale aggressively files to convert its $202 million trust into a spot ETF. What's vital to understand here is that because the asset already has an established futures market, it uniquely qualifies for fast-track ETF approvals from the likes of CBO and NASDAQ. Looking abroad, the strict July 2026 EU MiCA compliance deadline essentially sanitizes the European market, clearing the way for licensed entities to offer highly liquid spot trading and custody services. Section 6, the next great challenge, competing for liquidity. To maintain an objective reality, we absolutely have to acknowledge that despite these massive technological and regulatory triumphs, the network still faces highly tangible hurdles. Consider some of the active hurdles in the ecosystem right now. Decentralized exchanges like HonorSwap and CashDex are fully functional, but they're only averaging around $2 to $3 million in daily volume. And despite platforms like Cashland successfully locking up $8 million, the network currently ranks around number 92 in aggregate global total value locked. So the crucial point is this: the network's highly resilient community-funded infrastructure, powered by decentralized platforms like Flipstarter, now has to fight against massive, deeply entrenched liquidity moats. There is fierce stablecoin competition from established EVM networks like Base and Solana, right alongside the rapid encroachment of legacy Bitcoin Layer 2 rollup solutions. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. Can superior Layer 1 technology and absolute legal clarity truly capture the multi-billion-dollar liquidity moat of legacy networks? The Bitcoin Cash metamorphosis has engineered a mathematically brilliant, fully compliant, and rapidly clearing ecosystem. But the real battle for global decentralized liquidity, that's only just beginning. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep learning, stay focused, and I'll see you next time.
Cool. Well, that's kind of interesting. Mike, have you ever used Bitcoin Cash ever? Have you ever used it?
Once in my life, no.
Me neither. Me neither. I've not only have I never used it, I don't know anyone who's ever used it either.
No.
So, yeah, it's great that Bitcoin Cash has, seemingly upgraded its infrastructure and, but let's take a look at the price performance. So here's BCH, Bitcoin Cash. This is a daily. Why don't we just zoom out to a weekly real quick? Looks better than Litecoin. I'll give it that. It's trading above the 200-week moving average, trading above trendline support, for $440. But at the end of the day, this is still a highly volatile digital asset. And if we price this thing in Bitcoin terms, let's see what we get. Yep, that's what I was expecting. So this is, just nothing but depreciation in Bitcoin terms. So if you're going to hold something that's more volatile than Bitcoin, it had better be outperforming Bitcoin. If it's not, why are you holding it? Why not just hold BTC?
Exactly.
So, yeah. So that's what I had for today.
Awesome. Well, that's this isn't our last show for today. If you want to join David, and actually today as David and Ellie at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern for the daily market wrap. For David will again be doing TA technical analysis on all the top projects and the top movers. If you want to have him take a look at your project that you're interested in, make sure you join for that and the live coaching session. And tonight, me and Jeff will be doing crypto and chill. So we'll just be hanging out. Got me a little bottle of wine. I'm going to pop the cork and it always gets interesting after I have a couple of drinks. So and then what? Thursday, what do we got? Thursday night. Oh, so the red pill. So this Thursday, make sure you don't miss the red pill because both Jeff and David are going to be here at the cabin. So the casting couch here behind me, we're gonna be setting up a camera, and we're all gonna be, for the first time ever, be in the same room, and we're gonna be doing a red pill. So and my brother Taylor wants to join us. He won't be here live, but he'll be on the show. He was wanting to talk about. Honestly, he was explaining it to me. I'll post it, but he was wanting to talk about something he was pretty passionate about, and so I told him that we could do an episode on it this Thursday. It had to do with basically the ancient civilizations, that there had to be some sort of communication between them, just with all the similarities with the artwork, cave art, architecture, all the different similarities, around the globe. So anyway, it should be an interesting one.
I'm looking forward to that conversation. I spend a lot of time watching content about those ancient megalithic structures, and what I don't understand.
Tobio-Teki and all that.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of them. They're all over the world, and it seems like they're 10 or 20,000 years older or older. And it's like, number one, how were those granite stones cut? How were they moved? And who had the knowledge to be able to build these structures in the first place? And who had the knowledge of the stars? So it'll be an interesting conversation.
The alignment of a lot of those structures with celestial bodies, and just the accuracy that as far as timekeeping and things like that, and understanding the movement of the stars, and it's amazing to me. And then some of them, like in South America, where to this day the stones are so precise you can't even slide a razor blade or a piece of paper in between them. And it's like, okay, you're trying to tell me that people with hand tools crafted this stuff? I find it very hard to believe. And most of them supposedly didn't even have metal.
Right. But the thing for me too is granite is harder than metal.
Yeah.
You can only really cut it with diamond. So unless they had diamond tipped tools, like how did they cut the stone?
Yeah.
But not just that, there are some of these granite stones that are like 500 tons or 1,000 tons. Some of these obelisks are like 1,000 tons. Yeah. How do you move a 1,000 ton stone? How do you do that? So it'll be an interesting conversation for sure.
No, for sure. All right. So make sure you join us. And until next time, Veteran Crypto out.
Peace.